We're good at the school level, but they cannot lead adults. They cannot build a team. They can't inspire others. And then we focus also on culture and community, kind of the mindset that all children can achieve if given the right opportunity. And then finally, we do focus on operations and management, but that's a really low priority because that has been such a high priority in the old traditional model of education.
Thank you very much. Did I do that? Is it on? Okay. There you go. Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll come back to you in a minute. Dr. G, you've been through our Leadership Institute. You're now on the board of that Leadership Institute. What do you, talk about that experience, and then also what else do you see on the horizon for leadership opportunities for school leaders in Kentucky?
So in taking part, first of all, to be empowered to be a part of something, of a discovery, first initially within yourself to understand your skill sets. That was eye-opening. Before, you almost restrict yourself because you don't have certain capabilities or abilities. And took the Myers-Briggs, I am an INFJ. If you look it up, it says you're rare. And I'm going,
You're not that rare.
okay, good. 50% up here. But how does that fit into a system? How does that, how are you able to really not just see yourself, but to see others? It was very much eye-opening to understand that it's okay to be different, but then you have to quickly recognize who surrounds you and how you can utilize the gifts of others, to utilize skills, to understand that you have a responsibility to empower those with abilities to be a part of systematic changes and growth processes. That's real. And the most eye-opening thing is that if you don't have that a part of your leadership effort, and adults forming at a level that you are strategic, that you're intentional, that you hold others accountable, it will never happen in the classroom. Never. The beauty of that experience also extended me outside of the classroom walls. That is really engaging community members to be a part of processes, to absolutely grow the system together. I'm telling you, I'm looking at Pam Miller. I don't know if Pam realizes she empowered me as a community member. She was the mayor of Lexington. She started Summer Shades in Lexington. She started Summer Shades in my classroom at Wimber Middle School as a science teacher. From there, I realized that it's not an alone walk, and I think that with regards to CCL, it is eye-opening that building administrators of the future really needs to know how it is a shared vision. It is shared leadership. It is a shared process. Another aspect of shared leadership, student component. I wouldn't be here on the stage without Trey Grayson. Trey Grayson stopped me cold and said, if you don't want to be a medical doctor, I was a medical school student at Governor Scholars. I was his RA. He challenged me, said, do you really want to be a doctor? Years and years of parent pushing to be that top 1%. Years and years defined Ron Chi to be this. Years and years that I wasn't in my passion. It took a student leader to recognize the abilities. That all came out within my experiences at CCL to understand, oh, you've got framework. You've got a sandbox to really play. And all these leaders who've been a part of all of our lives, that's the experiences that building administrators have to be a part of.
One thing I'll mention about the program too is that CCL told us the best time for a principal to go through the program was after their first year of service in their leadership career. Now other programs, as Carol said, are for aiming at distressed schools or that sort of thing. We decided to put a premium on early principals, early in their career. It was not a program, it is not a program for trying to rejuvenate someone who has perhaps reached the end of their rope. And, that is just not meant for that. there's a place for a lot of different types of training, but that's one of the unique pieces of CCL. Gary, in the last 10 years, a lot of things have come online in terms of educator preparation in Kentucky. You've been on the forefront of some of that in your institution. What do you see on the horizon for programs across Kentucky?
So I speak primarily from my experience at Western Kentucky University, where I am involved in the principal preparation program and working with teachers who aspire to become school leaders. But I'm familiar with what's happening at many of our state institutions across Kentucky in leadership development. And so I can say that about 10 years ago, we went through a major effort across the state to improve the quality of principal preparation. That work was led by the Professional Standards Board, and there was a major emphasis on the principal as instructional leader. So playing off of the kind of research that Carol talked about, it's evident that principals have an impact on student learning. But we've come to realize that that impact is very indirect. So principals impact student achievement through their influence on teachers primarily. It's the way they build the academic capacity of the school through their relationship with teachers. And so increasingly we're starting to understand that whatever the principal does, all of their energies should be geared toward helping teachers improve their instructional practice, because teachers are the #1 avenue through which we can impact student learning. And so throughout our principal preparation program at WKU, and I believe at the other institutions as well, we put a heavy emphasis on that role of the principal as instructional leader. So whether you're talking about school law or budgeting or working with the community, everything should funnel through that lens of how are we leveraging these activities to improve student learning. And so we've had some real success with that in our program at WKU. The newly designed program is now starting its 4th year. But I think we all recognize at Western and elsewhere that there's still so much work to be done to improve principal training. And there's nothing inherently magical about doing your principal training at a university, but there are some real advantages to doing so in that universities should be the place where innovative research is taking place, cutting-edge ideas are being articulated, ideas that challenge the educational status quo should generate in a university. And so it makes sense that that kind of vibrancy would feed into the training and preparation of school principals. Unfortunately, what we also deal with this tension of being removed from the field of practice, and it's the challenge of being relevant to the kinds of work that principals are actually engaged in each day. And so I think increasingly we're aware of the need to become more closely tied with our district partners, to work much more hand in hand with the schools and districts that we serve. From the very beginning of principal development, which would be when those teachers are identified as potential leaders. So many folks tell me, and it's certainly my experience as a former administrator, as a teacher, I never dreamed of being a school principal. It was only when a principal whose opinion I really valued said, "You really have leadership skills, you ought to think about that," that became a reality for me. So universities have to be much more closely connected to schools in identifying those teachers who have that leadership capacity early on, all the way through their training, and then through their work on the job. So in those first critical years of a principal's career, the universities still need to be tied into the schools and districts in order to identify where those growth areas remain and help to facilitate the leadership development, whether it's through the university or through a program like the Leadership Institute that helps keep those principals on the cutting edge of practice and able to translate their work into real student results. So at WKU this week, we were able to make a really big announcement. We were very excited that on Thursday, we were able to share that WKU is one of 7 institutions, 7 universities across the United States that have been identified for a Wallace Foundation grant that is going to provide substantial support to continuing our redesign work with principal preparation. So we're going to be working with the Green River Educational Cooperative. Breck is our key partner in this work. We'll have technical assistance partners from Wallace and other institutions who will be working with us to take our principal development to the next level. And part of what we'll be looking at doing there is putting our principals through training that mimics the kinds of best practices that we want them to be leading out in their schools. So we'll be looking at personalization of the learning process. We'll be looking at competency-based instruction as a key method by which we guide our aspiring principals through their training. And we'll be partnering with GREC and the districts that we serve to create a data tracking system that will help us identify these aspiring leaders early on and determine their growth needs over time to create a more fluid process. And I'd say above all, one of the things that we want to do is help the principal understand their role as a leader of innovation. So this is part of the relevancy issue for universities, but I think for educational institutions in general. We recognize now, I think, that the way we've always done school is not going to be sufficient to meet the educational challenges of the 21st century. And so we've got to prepare our leaders not only to be effective in schools as they are, but in schools as they will become and should become in the future. And we want our principals to be able to participate in that conversation and help articulate that vision of what schooling might become in the future. So this grant, obviously we're very excited about, and we hope it becomes a model for what other institutions in Kentucky and elsewhere can do in terms of building those partnerships and being as relevant as we possibly can be for principal training in the future.
Great. Thanks very much, Gary. Jennifer, tell us more about the Appalachian Leadership Lab. How do you leverage that network to support leaders, and what successes have you seen?
Well, the Appalachian Leadership Lab is a project of the Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative. It was made possible through a Race to the Top district grant that the co-op received in 2014. That grant had 6 big areas of work assigned to it. It had things like personalized learning for students and educators, health and wellness, college and career readiness, different aspects of teaching and learning, but the one through thread that we saw through all of those things was leadership. And we have the vision or the idea that leadership really is, when you boil it all down, it is about improved teaching and learning. And with that vision of leadership, it comes to the fact that leadership is the work of everyone in that school. That a principal alone cannot have the knowledge, the capability, the expertise, or the time to be that instructional leader that is able to provide coaching and guidance to teachers, that's able to take care of the operations of the school, that's able to lead teachers through professional growth and development. But there's just a lot of work there. But they have the expertise within their schools and within their districts with their teacher leaders. So the Appalachian Leadership Lab, it was in its development year last year. We brought together a group of folks who represented shared leadership across their schools and districts. Teacher leaders, principals, the central office folks who serve those schools in an instructional capacity, and community members. And they engaged in some action research around what makes great shared leadership teams in a school. What makes those teams function well? They all chose a problem of practice that they wanted to solve in their schools and districts so that they could come together as a shared leadership team around that problem of practice. And through that work and through that action research, they created a framework of responsibilities and practices that represent what good shared leadership teams do in a school. They also developed a theory of action, that if this is what we want for our students, then what are the roles of each of those folks on those shared leadership teams? What must a teacher do in order to get those results for students? What must the principal do to support that teacher to get those results for students? What is that role of that central office person in supporting the principal and supporting the teacher to get to those results of students? And how do we engage our communities in real ways to support that work? So our design fellows, they really help to create that sort of, just for the lack of a better word, the scope and the sequence of what the future cohorts of the Appalachian Leadership Lab would look like. So this year we are in our first full year of operation. We have teams from 12 districts, 15 teams from 12 districts who are working together. They have identified their problem of practice. They've identified what is that challenge that we want to work on together. And so now we are engaged in a year of personalized professional learning for those teams to enable them, to empower them to be able to solve that problem of practice. We engage in monthly face-to-face meetings where we find the experts that are related to the problem of practice that they are working on. We've had training so far from Mike Rutherford and Tom Murray from the Alliance for Excellent Education. We've had our own experts from our region to come in and help prepare those shared leadership teams. Some of the problems of practice that they're working on, we have some that are working on personalized professional learning. How do we make sure that all of the folks in our building are getting that professional learning that they need to make the impact that they expect for their students? We have some shared leadership teams who are working on student engagement, that they know that as they look through their classrooms that there are kids who are not engaged in learning. So they're engaged in action research around what are those strategies for student engagement, and then how do we work together as a shared leadership team to ensure that everyone has that professional knowledge that they need to improve shared leadership. Successes, we're still in our beginning phases, but I think anecdotally that we can look at the fact that these folks have engaged in a lot of research and a lot of work. They have